Hello, and welcome back to the Southern Bible Thumper channel. I'm Cam, and this upload we will be reading Exodus chapter 2. And there went a man of the house of Levi, and took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived, and bare a son. And when she saw him, that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could not longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes, and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein. And she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. And his sister stood afar off to wit what would be done to him. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, and said, This is one of the Hebrews' children. Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, Take this child away, and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages. And the woman took the child, and nursed it. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses. And she said, Because I drew him out the water. And it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren, and looked on their burdens. And he spied an Egyptian smiting an Hebrew, one of his brethren. And he looked this way and that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian, and hid him in the sand. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together. And he said to him that did the wrong, Wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? Wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? And he said, Who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me, as thou killedst the Egyptian? And Moses feared, and said, Surely this thing is known. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh, and dwelt in the land of Midian. And he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water, and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them, and watered their flock. And when they came to Reuel their father, he said, How is it that ye are come so soon today? And they said, An Egyptian delivered us out of the land of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us, and watered the flock. And he said unto his daughters, And where is he? Why is it that ye have left the man? Call him, that he may eat bread. And Moses was content to dwell with the man. And he gave Moses Zipporah his daughter, and she bare him a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. And it came to pass, in process of time, that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of the bondage, and they cried, and their cry came up unto God by the reason of the bondage. And God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And God looked upon the children of Israel, and God had respect unto them. Summarizing Exodus chapter 2. A man of the house or tribe of Levi took to wife a daughter of the house or tribe of Levi. This woman conceived a son that was goodly. Some translations say that he was beautiful. The woman hid the baby boy for 3 months. When she could no longer hide the baby boy, she made a basket-like enclosure to put her baby in to float. The Pharaoh's daughter saw the basket and opened it. She was there bathing. She realized it was a Hebrew child. The baby's older sister was watching this happen, and when she saw that the Pharaoh's daughter found the baby, She offered the Pharaoh's daughter to find a Hebrew nurse, which was her mother and the baby's mother. In verse 9, Pharaoh's daughter told the mother that she would pay her to nurse the baby boy. The mother bought the child to Pharaoh's daughter once he was old enough, and she adopted him, giving him the name Moses because she drew him out of the water. Moses went upon among his people, observed their burdens, saw an Egyptian beating a fellow Hebrew. He looked around to make sure no one saw him, killed the Egyptian, and buried him. In verse 13, Moses saw two Hebrews and asked the one who was in the wrong, "Why are you beating that man?" The man then answered, "Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Will you kill us as you did the Egyptian?" Moses became afraid that what he did was known. Pharaoh heard about what Moses did and wanted to kill him, but Moses fled to Midian. When he got there, he sat by a well. Midian's priest had 7 daughters who went to water the flock. This man is unnamed as well, but he's just priest. Priest had 7 daughters. Oh no, he's named, but just not right now. 7 daughters who went to water the flock. The shepherds drove him away and watered the flock themselves. Moses helped, and he rescued the girls. So they were antagonistic towards these girls. The daughters then told their father that Moses helped them and watered the flock. The father, his name is Reuel, then invited him to live there, gave his daughter Zipporah for Moses to marry. And then they had a baby boy named Gershom. The king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel cried out. They groaned because of their bondage, and God heard their cry. Remember their covenant. God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and Jacob, and he had respect unto them. Some highlights from chapter 49, verse 28. Moses Moses' old name, the name that he had when he was before he was discovered by the Egyptian uh, princess. It's not known. His sister's name is unknown. His parents' name are unknown. We just know that the parents were from the house or tribe of Levi. So the tribe of Levi, chapter 49, verse 28, Joseph/Israel named his 12 sons as the 12 tribes of Israel before he died. So the tribe of Levi are the descendants of uh, the Israel/Jacob's son Levi in Genesis chapter 34. Levi and his brother Simeon committed mass murder. And then we see Moses committing murder before the first mention of him. He's murdered someone already, but that's who he comes from. It's Levi. Also, when I first read this, as when I started taking my notes, the first thing I said was, "Oh, Levi is Moses' father." No, Moses is a descendant of Levi. And when we look at Exodus chapter 1, verse 6, Joseph, which is Jacob/Israel. I keep saying Jacob/Israel because the names were used interchangeably. Jacob and Israel were used interchangeably. And then when we hear children of Israel, that's a descendant of Jacob, but he was also called Israel. So I'm just trying to really hammer that in that it was Joseph/Israel. But Joseph is Jacob's son. But in Exodus 1, verse 6, Joseph and all of his brethren, all of his relatives of that generation were dead. So this story of Moses is starting after Joseph and all of his brethren are not on earth anymore. The power of the Hebrew women survived the Hebrew males. It was because of the Hebrew women that the males were survived. Moses' mom hid him until she couldn't. And then when she couldn't hide him anymore because of the society that they were living in, she built a floating enclosure to protect him. Moses' sister watched over him. And then when he was found by the princess of Egypt, she went to the princess of Egypt and suggested that her mother, that the baby's mother, watch over him. The woman with the king's daughter found Moses floating and brought him to Pharaoh's daughter. Pharaoh's daughter had compassion and then paid his mother to care for him. It isn't clear if she knew that this was the mother or not, but she paid his mother to take care of her own baby during a time when these babies were supposed to be murdered, and she is the king's daughter, and her father is the one who made this ordinance to kill all the babies. So not only did she pay the baby's mother to care for him, but then she adopted him, giving him a privileged life as the son of a princess. Also, one point that I did not mention in Exodus chapter 1, Shiphrah and Puah. These were the Hebrew midwives that the Pharaoh told to kill all male Hebrew children. They did not comply, which contributed to the Hebrews growing their population even more. So in Genesis, we saw women doing some things that did not help progress the will of God. But now we're seeing women do the right things and use their abilities to protect the men. Moses killed a man who was beating a Hebrew. He saw two Hebrews fighting and then asked the instigator, "Why are they fighting?" The instigator responds to Moses, asking him, "Who do you think you are? You think you're a judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you killed that Egyptian?" Moses lived a life like an Egyptian in a culture that gives preference to Egyptians. Noticing Hebrew injustice and taking action against it would be a burden to him that he didn't have to take on. In Genesis chapter 9, verse 5, the commandment from God states that he will hold anyone accountable for any bloodshed, meaning that anyone who slays a man will be required to give an explanation to God. Moses was a Hebrew, and Hebrews are an oppressed population. But Moses grows up in luxury, and one of his first interactions recorded with his fellow Hebrews, he's going full throttle when observing an injustice against his own kind, against his own people. I don't want to say own kind, against his own people, right? And it seems like the people that he did it for did not appreciate this sentiment. I mean, they mocked him afterwards. Moses is unsure of how to interact with other Hebrews. The Hebrew that he observed getting beaten was probably severe. Maybe it was traumatic for him. But that may not have been how another Hebrew would have reacted in that situation. Moses, his intentions were good. But when he observed the two Hebrews' conflict, he interacted, trying to help 2 times. Moses was socialized as an Egyptian. He did not know how to relate to Hebrews other than to help them. Another thing to note, Moses wrote this book, or he's credited for writing the book of Exodus, as well as Genesis. A person that tells a recollection of events, you try your best not to have any bias, but we can't help adding some bias into the stories that we tell. If we're telling a recollection of events, it's impossible for us to not give some bias because well, our bias, our experiences. It's how we make sense of new information and of the world around us. So while this is moral on the surface of him being so upset that he wants to do something, he has not immersed himself in the Hebrew way of life. He grew up in luxury. Now he wants to save the Hebrews. He had no idea why those two Hebrew men were fighting. I mean, from what he was able to observe, but this could have been a situation like the Montagues and the Capulets, where this had been a generational beef. He doesn't know because he didn't take the time to immerse himself in their culture, get to know these people. He wanted to play peacemaker, particularly after murdering an Egyptian the day before, which may have made things worse for the Hebrews. The reason why I say he has not immersed himself in the Hebrew way of life and he can't relate to them because he grew up as an Egyptian, in verse 19, when he goes to Midian, the girls at the well tell their father, Ruel, that they tell their father that Moses was an Egyptian. My handwriting was a little bit janky right there. But in verse 19, the girls at the well tell their father Moses was an Egyptian. So to an outsider, to someone who maybe didn't live right in the same country he was living in, the way he presented himself, possibly the way he communicated, the clothing that he wore, all said Egyptian. So he wasn't a Hebrew like that. He hadn't been immersed in the culture enough to play peacemaker. The Hebrews responded to him in a mocking way about the murder of the Egyptian, but it helped him to be warned that the Pharaoh was coming for him, because he was. Had the Hebrews not mocked him that way, he wouldn't have had that information. He wouldn't have been able to get a head start to leave Egypt. It was a good idea because Pharaoh was planning to kill him. But the king of Egypt that wanted to kill Moses, he died in verse 23. And the children of Israel cried out in bondage. I am very excited to get through the next chapter. When I read this story as a child, I thought it was so noble that the first thing he wanted to do was dive in and help his people. But the way that could have been perceived from the Hebrews, this is a person who has a privilege, who, even though he is part of the oppressed group, he gets to live a life of privilege. To the other people who don't get to live a life of privilege, but they're the same ethnicity, they might have perceived that as a person overstepping their bounds because he doesn't really know anything about the Hebrew culture. He's viewing them from the outside. It's a noble ambition, but the execution may not have been appreciated. From Moses' point of view, he was trying to do something noble. Thank you for watching the video up until this point. I look forward to reading Exodus chapter 3. Have a good night.